Hello and welcome to another video. So for this video we're going to be restoring a Dinky Toys Hawker Hurricane, which is the number 718, but actually in this case this is actually a built Dinky Action Kit 1041. So as you can see, the inside of the aircraft hasn't been painted, so it's not come out of the factory like this. Now obviously the owner of this particular plane has decided to paint it red and gold, which actually looks quite funky, but I don't think we're going to keep it like that. So as you can see, it's largely intact. It's a little out of shape, we can fix that, and the undercarriage is very loose, so we can tighten that up as well, but obviously it's missing the usual propeller clear parts, but otherwise it's not too bad. And it's even got its firing mechanism, which will make a nice little ta-ta-ta-ta-ta sound. Now, as you may or may not know, but during the Battle of Britain there were roughly 2 to 1 the proportion of Hurricanes to Spitfires, and the RAF had people from different nationalities flying with the RAF from all over the world. The largest foreign pilots contingency was Polish. So if you were a Luftwaffe pilot on a little visit to southern England in 1940, you were very likely to be greeted by a Hawker Hurricane piloted by a very angry Polish pilot. So yes, just bear that in mind. So as you can see, it's quite straight. The wings are a little bit bent, but just like slight squeeze actually fixed that. So I didn't even bother recording it because it was so ridiculously easy. I didn't bother. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it apart, remove the screws, now the red paint's done quite a good job of gluing the thing together, so we had to use a little bit of force to separate the two halves. Sorry, not force, gentle persuasion. Now as you can see inside, the undercarriage just uses 2 little spring clips to keep the undercarriage down and retracted. As you can see, they're very loose. And what we'll do is those circular circlips, is that the right word? We'll just give those a squeeze down. Now, as is usual for these, the 20mm cannons are broken off, and we've ordered some new ones, so we'll just remove the old broken ones, or one. As you can see, it was broken off and then the aircraft was painted, so that's a bit of a story there, no doubt. Now, rather than motorise this model, Dinky just decided to put a little wheel that you can operate with your thumb, and it would just flick a little piece of spring inside the aircraft to give the impression of gunfire. I think it would be much better if this had been motorised. But there you go. So, see, it's very simple. There are very few parts in this aeroplane. Obviously you've got the exhausts, which part of their role is to hold the pin of the air propeller in place. Obviously we're missing all our blades, so one of those is on order as well. Now I gave the wings a very slight bend, and that fixed the difference in the angles of the wing components. So basically just reduce the dihedral of the wings a little bit if you like. So obviously at some point someone's given it a bit of a hammering or a heavy landing or something. Okay, so here I've just taken the landing legs off, which is very easy to do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip those separately, and we're going to experiment with Dettol and see if Dettol is any good, and see if we can not damage the wheels, the plastic wheels. Okay, so the 2 main castings we're going to put into caustic soda to strip the paint off. So at the moment it's just hot water. And here comes the caustic soda. So very satisfying fizzing, and the water will soon turn red. There you go. Bubbling away. All together now, frying tonight. Now I haven't quite got enough liquid to cover the model completely, so I'm just turning it over and doing the other side, so it's a bit like doing eggs or something. only not as tasty. Okay, so we're out of the caustic soda. We've got nearly 99% of the paint off, so we're just going to give it a rub down with a wire wheel on our universal tool, and we'll be ready for painting. Right, it's all nice and shiny, so that's ready to go and be painted now. It's not bad, is it? Now, some people have suggested using Dettol to strip paint, and I have to admit I was a bit sceptical of this because I've seen some other YouTubers try this and it not work. But anyway, so here we are, and the key to doing this is using the brown Dettol, because it's got a different ingredients than the green stuff. So anyway, so in it goes. Let's see what happens. And we'll leave this overnight. We'll give it, say, 24 hours and see what happens. So 24 hours later, apart from the room smelling of Dettol, the paint does look to be lifting. So we're going to grab hold of each of these legs and we're going to give them a quick scrub with the toothbrush. Right, well, you have to admit that worked quite well. If I can get it to focus. Focus. There you go, willpower. Right, so as you can see, it has indeed removed the paint. So that's quite impressive. Some residual bits left, but we'll pick those out with a toothpick or the tips of some pliers or something. It should be fine. Now, I had a change of heart as to how I was going to paint this, and I ended up removing the wheels anyway. So that I can paint the legs without having to worry about getting paint on the tyres. But as you can see, the paint's all quite loose and it just picks off fine. So there you go, Dettol, and it's much easier to handle than the brake fluid, because obviously the brake fluid is quite messy and you've got to wash it off afterwards, whereas this is very easy to clean up afterwards. So yeah, Dettol, way to go. Now here I've put the undercarriage legs back on, and I've been pressing in those washery retaining ring things just by pressing down with a screwdriver, not too hard so it doesn't flatten them out, just to tighten them up, and that seems to do the job. As you can see now, the undercarriage isn't dangling and it's nice and tight again. So that's the result. Okay, so we're just going to spray some primer on, just some grey primer. I haven't got any white primer, so I'm having to make do with what I've got, I'm afraid. Now, if you want to support your local YouTuber so they can afford more paint, etc., leave an ad running for 30 seconds rather than clicking skip, and apparently it generates much more money. As it is, 15,000 views, would you believe, generates less than a £5, so it's hardly worth even doing it. And here's the paint I'm using, which is I'm going to use the entire model. It's going to be done in the Vallejo, and I'm trying my best to pronounce it properly. If Vallejo wants to send me some free paint, I'm not going to argue. Okay, and then we're just going to spray the upper half of the model the same colour. Now, the great advantage of the Vallejo paints is they are entirely water-based and they don't use any horrible chemicals. And so my spray booth here isn't being vented to outside at all, it's just catching the particles of paint so you're not breathing them in. But otherwise, apart from that, there's no horrible smells or gases that you have to worry about, which a lot of the rattle cans and, frankly, some of the other so-called water-based acrylic paints also use. Now I'm going to put on some Ocean Grey, I think it is, and I'll just see if you guys can work out what this is going to turn out like. I'm not going to say what I'm painting, but I'm just having a bit of fun with this. Right, once that's dried, we're going to mask the plane up for the second coat of paint. Okay, so I'm going to be using some Vallejo dark green. Now my airbrush kept blocking when I was doing this, so I got really annoyed with it, so for the underside I'm going to paint it by hand. I think we all know what colour this is. And for this as well I put on 2 coats, so I'll just fast forward through that because I don't think you'll have to watch painting black paint on. Okay, so as you may have noticed, we're kind of going for a Night Intruder paint scheme, which the Mark II Hurricanes were used for. And this can either be in a completely black paint scheme, which would be a bit boring, so we're going for the sort of mixed camouflage and black look. Actually, I think in camouflage terms, instead of saying black, you're supposed to say night. Anyway, so here we go, right, we're actually going to try glossing this to be a bit more like a Dinky produced model. So basically we're just painting the underside and we're just spraying it till it looks wet, and then we'll leave it at that. Okay, so here I'm actually going to make my own decals, and I'm just using Adobe Photoshop for this, but you can use any kind of paint program or even Word probably. So I'll just create my registration letters, which I'm using the font Helvetica for, I think. Now you might have noticed I'm using an older version of Photoshop. I'm actually using CS6 because I've got that fully licensed to me, and once I've bought it I don't have to pay for it any further, which unfortunately Adobe's gone to a software renting scheme where you have to pay 10 quid a month. So basically for the number of years I've had this, I've saved hundreds of pounds just by using the same program, and I have used Adobe CC, and it's not a huge improvement over CS6, it's all sort of subtle changes. Anyway, know that someone's going to have a moan at me about saying that, but honestly that's what I believe. And the only way I'm going to have enough money to go to CC is to get lots of people to watch loads of adverts. I don't think that's going to happen. Now here I've pasted into the document a roundel from Wikipedia. Okay, and so basically I don't have to draw this. I could draw this from scratch because I have got Adobe Illustrator as well, but it's just easier just to use Wikipedia because they already provide you with the images. So all I'm doing here is I'm just scaling the roundel down so it kind of matches the lettering. Now I've zoomed in a bit and I'm going to space the lettering out, and I'm going to move the roundel into the position I'd like. I mean, basically how the Photoshop does this isn't really relevant. It's more a case of if you've got any kind of paint program or image program, you can do this. There's nothing special about this. Now I'm just going to duplicate the lettering, as obviously I need a transfer for both sides of the fuselage of the Hurricane. Okay, so now I'm going to create some text for the tail number. So not to worry about the size, we'll just scale this down. Now I am skipping over this quite a bit, but basically it's how to make this is you just basically draw out your decals, print them out onto special paper, which I'll show you in a moment. I'm just going to get this sorted out first. Now basically I'm organising the decal elements so they're on one side of the page, so that I can then copy them and then have several elements across the top of the paper. This enables me to print out multiple attempts at this and not waste lots of paper on the printer from, again, Wikipedia, which I'll scale down and duplicate and move over to the same side. Now I'm just going to resize and duplicate these roundels, and then basically we've got enough there to make a set of transfers. So what we're going to do is we're going to print this out on ordinary plain paper first, cut it up, put each element on the plane, see what it looks like, then come back to here, resize the individual elements, print them out again, cut them up, try them out on the plane, see what it looks like, and if necessary repeat until we're happy. Only when we're completely happy with the size of the transfers, we'll duplicate them across the page and we'll print it out using the transfer paper, and that way we'll have multiple copies of the transfers to use in case there's a mistake. and we won't waste paper trying to cut little L shapes out of the paper. We can actually put the whole thing back through the printer again. Okay, so this is our sheet of bog standard paper with our transfers on, and I'm just going to crudely cut them out and just hold them up to the plane to see what they look like for size. Okay, so not too bad. I might scale these down slightly, but we're in the right ballpark. And then we'll do this for the other transfers. So here I think the wing roundels are a little bit too small, so I'm going to scale those again. Here I'm just giving the top of the plane a quick going with a gloss varnish. Top coat, sorry, same thing. Basically just to provide a smoother contact surface for the transfer, so you don't get that white frosting silvering effect. Okay, before I put the transfers, the decals, on, I'm just going to put on the third party components, so then I won't have to open the plane up again. So here are our 20mm cannons. A little bit flashy, but they'll be okay. And here's our propeller, which is quite flashy, so we'll just give that a bit of a file and use a knife just to sort that out. Okay, so before fitting the propeller to the Hurricane, we're just going to paint it. I'm going to put 3 coats of red and yellow on. Now there's not very much to assemble on the Hurricane. There's basically, once the cannons are in place and the little clicker plate's in place, you just drop the wheel in, pop the exhaust stubs and the propeller on, and we're all set and the aeroplane's ready to go. Now I'm sorry about the vicious editing, but I'm just trying to keep the runtime down, because otherwise you can make videos of hours if you're not duration if you're not careful. Now here I'm just using a dab of super glue on the axles to fix the wheels back onto the undercarriage. I won't show all of that because basically I'm trying to keep the runtime down, but I'm just showing the fact that that's how I did it. Okay, so now we're going to print out the decals, and for this I'm using waterslide decal paper, which I got from Amazon. Now this is the clear, the transparent paper, and what I should have done is use the white backed paper. There's just 2 sorts, there's either clear or there's white backed, because basically a inkjet printer does not print white. So where it's white it'll actually end up being transparent, which will cause me a problem later. So what you want to be doing is printing on the shiny side of your paper, which in my case, on this printer, if I put it in the top, shiny side up, that's the side that will come out printed on. Now in your printer settings, for when you're actually printing the decals themselves, you want to be printing as though they were high gloss photos, so you get the best print quality. It's slower and uses more ink, but you'll get a better result. So these will obviously be the same size as your trial sized cutouts of the ordinary paper, but these are now ready to go. Now what you should do now is spray some clear coat on the decals, otherwise they'll basically dissolve when you put them in water, which I forgot to do on the first time round, and I can show you the result of that in a moment. Now I thought I was being clever using the clear transparency paper, because I thought, well, if I'm doing complex shapes like circles and lettering, then the transparent edges will, get me away with it. But what will happen is the transfers go a bit dark, and the white transfers just go see-through. So I ended up having to bodge it by using these transfers and transfers I had left over from a kit to get around it. Now here I'm just showing you what happens if you do not seal the transfers before you put them in water. They just get destroyed. So you have to spray them with some varnish of some sort to seal them. So anyway, these have been sealed, as you can see they're all shiny. And away we go. So this has just been dipped in warm water, which it softens very rapidly, and there's just been some Microsol Microset put on the model to help the transfer blend in. As you can see, the transparency's come back to haunt me now, because you can actually see through the transfer slightly. But it's not too bad on these ones, so I've decided I'll just live with it. Lesson learnt, etc. Now here I thought I might be able to get away with putting some white paint on the sides of the plane where the white part of the side roundels would be, but it just shows through the thing anyway, so I ended up having to come up with a more creative solution, or a bodge as other people might call it. Now the tail lettering, I decided to get around that by making the tail band wider than it should be, just so that the whole of the tail number will show on it, and thereby kind of get away with it. But obviously in the roundels that's not worked, so I've got another solution for that in a moment. Now acrylic paints don't stick too well to plastic if you don't use a primer, so this actually works to your advantage when you're painting transparent parts, because what you can do is paint the lines of the framing, and if you go over the edges, don't worry about it. Even if you go over the edges a lot, don't worry about it, because what you can do is once it's dried, put a couple of coats on. You can use a cocktail stick just to scratch the paint off from where it shouldn't be, and you'll get a fairly decent result without having to rely on masking or some sort of ridiculous painting skills, which I haven't got, I'll be quite honest with you. But this is a way around that problem. Now, I had some roundels on transfers left over from doing a Revell Blackburn Skua, I think from ages ago. Now, they're not quite the right roundels for the sides for the period, but hey ho, I won't tell anyone if you don't tell anyone. But no doubt someone will point it out. So again, having wetted our transfer, and then just slide it off over the other roundel. And once that's dried off a bit, we'll then dried off a little bit, it's not completely dry, slide on the dot and realign them both. And we'll do that for both sides and see how we get on. Okay, for the tail markings, I didn't have any left over from the Skua kit, but I did have them from a Gloucester Meteor kit, a Matchbox one from the 80s, spare set of transfers. So this is like I'm using a jet markings on a Hawk or Hurricane, but basically all the same. So we'll just clean that in with a bit of microset and microsol, and that should be fine. Okay, we'll scratch the paint off the canopy, and that's left us for this finish, which is still slightly irregular, but it's at the scale it's at, you're not quite looking at it this close, so it's not too bad. And this canopy was never really intended to be painted anyway, whereas you find some of the scale model kits, they're kind of easier to paint. And we'll just snap that on, and we're good to go. So we'll have a look at this on the turntable. Okay, so here we have one Dinky Mark II Hurricane in Night Intruder colour scheme, and I'm fairly happy with how it came out. The transfers were very stressful, but I learnt a lot from doing it, and hopefully I can pass that on to you guys as to how to do it better in future. Anyway, so if you've liked what you've seen and would like to see more, please subscribe, click the bell thing, because otherwise you can be subscribed and not get told when there's a new video. And if you want to really help the channel, grit your teeth and watch 30 seconds of an advert, because apparently that's the magic number according to YouTube. But if you don't want to, that's fine. Please like, dislike and comment away. Okay, we've got another plane coming in the next video, and it's a bit of a wreck. So we'll see you then. Thank you. Bye.